There's so many things we can do there, but there aren't a lot of places doing calf research now.
Welcome to another episode of the Beef Podcast Show. My name is Dr. Stephanie Hansen. I'm a feedlot nutritionist at Iowa State University, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Glenn Duff. Dr. Duff received his BS degree from Northwest Missouri State University, MS degree from the University of Arkansas, and PhD from New Mexico State. Dr. Duff worked as a research specialist for the University of Arkansas, as a sales nutritionist for Far Better Feeds, and as a postdoc, interim superintendent and superintendent for the New Mexico State University Clayton Livestock Research Center. Dr. Duff was an associate professor and then professor at the University of Arizona. He then was department head for the Animal and Range Sciences and interim dean of the College of Ag at Montana State University. He moved to New Mexico State University to be department head of Animal and Range Sciences. He currently serves as professor and superintendent for the New Mexico State University Clayton Livestock Research Center and has published 89 peer-reviewed articles and been director or co-project director of over $10 million in funding. He has taught applied nutrition, statistical methods, beef production, stocker and feedlot management, and dairy production courses, has served a variety of offices across the Animal Science Society, especially in the Western section and the National Society, and has been active in his local community as a youth supporter, a member of the Rotary Club of Tucson Sunset, where he served on numerous club committees, and has been the board of directors serving as secretary, president-elect, president, and past president. Currently the president of the Rotary Club of Clayton. Glenn and Donna have a farm south of Clayton and grow forages and purebred Gelbvieh cattle. They have one son, Tim, residing in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So welcome to the show, Glenn.
Thank you. And I grew up in Ogallala, Iowa.
I feel like we should just call this show 6 Degrees of Iowa because every guest is like, well, I'm from Iowa, or I went to Iowa State for this degree, or my grandparents are from Iowa. So nice. I love it. I love it. Well, you can see here behind me in the sunroom, if you happen to be watching the show on YouTube, we definitely got some snow yesterday, but you just said that you got some snow in New Mexico too.
We did. We were happy to receive it.
Absolutely. Well, you've had quite the journey, kind of a balance of faculty positions and administrative roles. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the beef industry and what brought you to this point of your career.
Yes. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Ogallala and actually grew up raising purebred swine, and then went to Northwest and actually worked in dairy production. And then my master's was in dairy science of reproductive physiology related area. And then when I moved to New Mexico State University, I got involved in the beef industry and the feedlot industry, working with Dr. Mike Gallion was my major professor. And then I was fortunate to have worked up here at the Clayton Livestock Research Center during my PhD program, and Glenn Lofgren was the superintendent at the station. So that kind of steered me towards the feedlot nutrition management aspect. So really enjoyed working with cattle.
It'd be hard not to with both Gallion and Lofgren influences there. Those are some of our classic names in feedlot nutrition. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about your current role there at the Livestock Research Center, and then we're going to jump into talking about some of the really cool research you guys have going on right now.
Okay, so my current role is primarily a faculty member. There's always some administration that we deal with, but I do the research. So I basically got a 70% research, 30% teaching appointment. In my current teaching, I been the primary instructor for a stocker feedlot class, and then I also teach dairy production class. And then the research deals anything from receiving calves all the way through finishing. We do some stocker work, working at different pastures, improved pastures on irrigated land. And then we also are doing just the finishing work. So all phases of the feedlot industry. And then personally, I have some purebred Gelbvieh cows too. So I also do some, trying to do some seed stock work there. And then we're going to be using those cows on a new project where we're looking at methane production in those cows on improved pastures versus some of the annuals that we're doing here.
Excellent. So remind our listeners where exactly Clayton is.
Middle of nowhere.
Well, I teed you up for that one.
You did. So we are in the northeast corner of New Mexico. I can look out my window here, see Texas and Oklahoma, literally.
Right. So, right. And that's what I wanted to make sure listeners appreciated, how close you are to really the heart of some of the cattle feeding territory there, the Panhandle and stuff of Texas.
Yes. So we're about 7 miles east of Clayton. We are 4 miles from Texas and about 6 miles from the Oklahoma Panhandle. So we're in the High Plains area. The elevation here is about 5,000 feet. So we are pretty high. We get pretty cold in the winter, get some quite a bit of snow from time to time, and then cold weather. But the nice thing, because of the elevation, we don't have a lot of problems with heat stress here. In fact, we hardly ever have any heat stress issues. Most of my places that I've lived up here, we don't even have air conditioning. So, because the wind blows all the time, we're actually, I think, the 11th windiest city in the United States. So it keeps it from getting too hot in the summer. So
interesting.
Also makes it colder in the winter.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was like 1 degree, feels like minus 12 here or something this morning. And I'm going to Florida next week for a conference, and it's supposed to be 87. And I'm heat stressed just at the thought of going to 87 degrees in February.
Yes, definitely.
So tell us a little bit more. I've actually never been to the Clayton facility, but I've heard a lot about it from Mark Brainine and other kind of friends and colleagues that I have. And I know it's got a long history of some great feedlot research and great folks working there. Tell us a little bit about the facility that you have there.
This facility was built in 1978 was the opening. So they started building the research center somewhere around 1976. So it was appropriated by the state legislature with the focus of the research to work on health and performance of newly received calves. We have 48 feedlot pens, and the pens have, they're about 50 foot wide by 110 foot long. So we can hold somewhere around 20 head on the finishing diets, newly received calves. We could put a few more in, 25, 30 head in each pen. They have automatic waters in the pens. They have concrete feed bunks, feeding pad right along the bunks. And the feed mill, we are able to steam flake our corn. We can bring in all of our commodities. We have some commodity bays where we can bring in our co-products, the hays, and then most of the time we mix our own premix in the mills and then store it in overhead bins. So it's a really practical facility. It has a nice slope to it. We don't get a lot of rain here, so we don't have any problems with mud. It can get cold in the winter. And as I mentioned, we usually don't have that many problems in the summer with heat stress because of the low humidity. And then the wind does blow, so the cattle don't have that many problems with heat stress. And then we sit on the Kiowa National Grasslands. So the Forest Service is actually our landlord or the government. And then we 320 acres. We have 120 acres that we have a center pivot that doesn't currently work, but our well over there pumps about 800 gallons a minute. So we could raise corn or grow corn if we wanted, but most of the time we'll do annuals. We'll look at winter wheat and then do that with the center pivot. So it's a really nice setup. And then we have about probably 200 or 180 acres of native grass that we can do some smaller projects with some minimally fistulated animals if we want. We don't have enough that we can do any production research on that, but we can do more basic projects on the native range.
So you've got, you don't have the rain problem, air quotes around problem. So you don't have mud in your pens, but you've got the counter problem to that, right? Which is a limited amount of water. We were chatting a little bit in the pre-show talking about how you sit on top of the Ogallala Aquifer. So tell us some of the things that you guys are studying right now to try to figure out how you help producers in that area deal with the future with water limitations.
Yeah, so there's a lot of data coming out that the Ogallala, particularly the southern Ogallala that goes down the Texas Panhandle, southern part of New Mexico is on the Ogallala. It is decreasing in volume. So some of the things that we're doing with research here is we're looking at alternative forages. So we've got one study that we're doing that's on a private facility, but we're looking at planting some perennial pastures. So it's got fescue in it. It has brome grass, perennial ryegrass, orchard grass, intermediate wheatgrass, creeping wheatgrass, and then we also planted 5 pounds per acre alfalfa. We're looking at that versus our annuals, and most of the annual production here is wheat pasture. So we do wheat. Some people will follow it up, double crop it with millet or a Sudan grass hay grazer type forage. So we're looking at alternative forages for production on these irrigated pastures. There's been some papers coming out that one paper actually mentions that now is the time to make the transition over to the grasses if you're going to do it, while you still have the water to get them started. Because eventually the water's not going to be there. And several of the pastures around this part of the country they will only irrigate about half the pasture because that's all the water that they can put down. So then we have to look at different production practices for these producers when the water as the water continues to decline.
So are you seeing some changes too in I don't know that we know much about this yet, but do we know the cow that has a lower water requirement or, picking the right beast for some of these environments?
Yeah, so that's one of the other projects we have going on is we're looking at some heritage breeds. Right now we're working with Ramirez Criollo cattle, which is a specific subtype of Criollo. And your Criollo cattle are like your old world Spanish type breeds. So like your Corrientes or your Ropen steers or Criollos, Longhorns are Criollos, Florida Crackers are Criollos. So they're a smaller breed cow. And one of the things they found out in research conducted at the Jornada is these Criollo cattle will utilize the landscape better than some of our larger breed animals. There's data suggests they'll travel farther away from water. And then maybe not water as often as some of the traditional beef breeds that we use. But we don't know if they have lower water requirements or take in less water. It may be that they drink more water while they're there on a percentage basis. But one of the problems that we have then is if you go to market the Criollo type cattle, like your Corriente calves, even Longhorn calves, you really get a dock at the sale barn because of the perception that these cattle, and they probably don't perform as well in the feedlot or produce as good at carcass kind of characteristics. So we looked at crossing these cows to produce calves. They were Angus crosses. We had red Angus crosses and then also Brangus. And when those calves come into the feedlot, if you didn't know that they were Criollo crosses, you wouldn't be able to tell. And we just harvested the second year's data, and it looks like they perform just as well and then also produce just as high of a quality carcass as our traditional beef breeds.
That's really interesting. Do you think that your producers largely use bulls out on range, or is there much artificial insemination that's being used as you think about? Okay. Yeah. So that'd be one of the challenges, right? Like we have an Angus bull that's going to have to survive in that same environment with a bunch of cows that are like, this is great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It is a challenge, and then It's one of the benefits that we've been talking about is with these cows is, you have to have the majority of your animals as that biotype to really get the benefits on the semi-arid, arid environments of the Southwest. So it really doesn't work just to have a bunch of cows and put a Criollo bull on them versus having Criollo cows and putting the beef breeds on the cows. So.
I think one of the things that's so fascinating about what's that, necessity is the mother of invention statement, right? So that I think we're going to be forced to be more creative than ever as we're facing some of these challenges. So that's going to be very interesting to see what you guys come up with on this water shortage side.
It will be, yep. And then we're also, at the same time as we're going to be looking at the methane production on the cows. We bought some green feed systems that measures the methane, and then also that measures CO2, and we got the oxygen sensors on there. Eventually, I'd like to develop energy equations for some of these different cows and just see what the best breeds are for the landscape that we have here.
Yeah, and so many challenges associated with intake and other things on grazing animals, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned when you were telling us about the station there, or the research center, that one of its kind of jobs was to work on receiving cattle challenges. So both the nutrition and maybe the health side of it. So maybe let's start with what would you say are some of the most impactful research studies that have come out of that center in terms of what we know about receiving cattle?
Metaphylactic use of antibiotics has been probably one of the research projects that we've had that's really become industry standard has been some of the work we've done here on metaphylactically treating animals. And that goes back to when Dr. Glenn Lofgren was here. He was looking at oxytetracycline, metaphylactically treating the animals, and then we've done some work since then. But that's one of the management tools that does work, but with everything that comes about with the potential for antibiotic resistance, is we look at alternative projects to see if we can get the animals eating better. And once they start eating, then we believe that that's half the battle. And then we had a graduate student that just completed her master's degree. We were looking at water intake with these animals. We were looking at putting out different water tanks in addition to our automatic waters. And we did find out that these additional tanks, they will drink more water, total water with those tanks versus using automatic water. So we believe that they're probably more familiar with those tanks. And that way they're more likely to go up and drink water. And if you can get them rehydrated, that should be a better way to get them off to a good start. So it's a challenge. If you don't metaphylactically treat these animals, we can have 60-70% morbidity in those animals. So, and even when you metaphylactically treat them, it'll go down 15-20% morbidity. So,
because you would be bringing a pretty high risk calf into your feed yard.
Yeah, so we get our calves from the southeastern United States. They are most of them are still balling calves, so they were weaned at the sale barn. They're pretty high risk calves coming in. So, and we work with our local veterinarians to ensure that the health of the calves are, we can do the best of our ability to maintain them healthy. So.
Yeah, that calf has a few disadvantages, right? So he may or may not have been castrated if we're talking about a male. So then we have that extra stress. We, in the Southeast U.S., except for a few places, we're mostly talking about relatively small producers. So they might have put some pot loads together with their neighbors. So you've got commingling right off the bat. And then that's a long truck ride between, say, Georgia or Kentucky and, the near Panhandle of Texas. They're probably on a truck for 15 to 20 hours.
Yeah, most of them coming in here are on the truck about 18 hours. So we get a lot of calves from Louisiana, Texas border. We get them from Mississippi. So they're on the truck a long time. And then it's they're commingled with new calves. They're introduced to new pathogens. They, like you say, they may or may not have been vaccinated. Most of them probably haven't been vaccinated. If you get some male calves in, pretty good likelihood they're going to be bulls. So then we have to castrate them. And that's added stress on them. So they're pretty highly stressed animals when they come in.
Yeah, it's interesting that your trucking event, being about 18 hours, that's actually what a lot of our research at Iowa State has been using. We've been between 16 and 20 hours for a lot of our trucking events. Sometimes people will push back and say, is there really any calves that are on the truck for that long? And I'd say my example is always, if you're a Southeast calf and you're going to a feedlot in Oklahoma or something like that, yes, you're on a truck for 16 to 18 hours. So I think it's so interesting to think about. I love looking to like the human literature, right? So what are they learning about muscle recovery in the human literature or other things, even the swine literature, other species, right, that have to truck animals? What are we learning about how trailer vibrations or the quality of the truckers, right? There's some great data from Canada that would say like the more experienced truckers can get you a lot less stressed animal, right? Because they're not cornering on two wheels. Not that you'd have cornering 9 wheels, I guess, on an 18-wheeler.
Yeah. Yeah. Or going up to the stop sign and slamming on the brakes. And there's things even like the cleanliness of the trailer. We'll have some calves come in, if they're on the bottom, they'll come in wet. And if it's like this time of the year, they're going to be cold stressed. And, that. And then the exhaust on the trailers, and if they happen to have a breakdown along the way, that just adds more hours those animals are on the trailer. I think one of the good things we've done in the industry is set up the beef quality assurance trading for transportation. And if we can get more people thinking about what we're doing on these calves, I think we would have fewer problems. And I almost got lynched at a Southern Section meeting when I brought up that perhaps they don't do as good a job in the Southeast on vaccination programs. They almost threw me out of the meeting, but I think it's true. With the smaller producers, some of them don't have the facilities that they need to properly vaccinate their animals. And if we could do a better job on vaccination programs, I think that goes a long ways towards the health of these animals too. And we had a farm in Missouri, and our neighbor there, this was like 2-3 years ago, thought he was doing everything he could when he vaccinated his animals because he gave them black leg. And I brought up that you have them up there, it's not that much more expense to give them a respiratory vaccine. Look at your IBR, PI3, BVD, BRSV. If you do that, and then also if they could just wean the calves even for a few days to get them over wanting to find their mama, I think that goes a long ways for improving the health of the animals.
Yeah, you're so right, though. The smaller operations, sometimes it's labor, sometimes it's infrastructure. We push things like pasture line or fence line weaning, but if you don't have another pasture, it's pretty hard to have a fence line between it, right? You only have a pasture because that's all you have, or you don't have a place that you can haul them down the road because you don't have the right equipment. That's a real challenge. And the segmentation of the beef industry is such a challenge, period.
It is. And one of the things we're doing on another side project we're doing here for, it's on that CAP grant, NEFA grant that we have. We're looking at virtual fence, and I would like to look at using virtual fence for weaning practices, because we know if we use the nose
flaps.
Yeah, nose flaps. That's less stress on those animals. So maybe we could even look at something like a virtual fence for weaning those calves so they can see their mama and have a little bit of separation. So I think that would be a really interesting project.
Definitely. So tell us a little bit. So the stressed calf has arrived at your yard. I know you guys have done lots of work on some of the maybe nutritional strategies on arrival to help him get off to the best start. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on now in that field.
Yep. So we're going to be looking at just using some long stem hay. There's been some progress reports out there and then a few Western section papers, but we really don't know what the best long stem hay that we might be able to put out after arrival to see if we can get those calves started eating, getting their rumen really developing again. We're doing that. We recently published a paper where we're looking at fat source, or just including fat in the diet of these animals. So we've got that. We've been doing things with some feed additives, just seeing if that would help get these animals off to the right start. The other thing, I've got a graduate student working on her PhD, and we're going to be looking at hospital diets. When we get these animals, what do we feed them? Is it better to put them back in their home pen? Is it better to put them in a hospital pen where they're exposed to newer animals, other pathogens? So we're going to be looking at just what can we do? How can we feed these morbid animals?
Yeah. So what kind of things are you digging into when you're thinking about the hospital versus the home pen? Because I think that is one of the biggest questions that we have. We just don't really know what to feed the sick animal.
We don't. So looking at different energy levels, and most likely you're going to have to add a little bit of fat into those hospital diets. Roughage sources, there's a lot of people believe in feeding them like cottonseed hulls for their roughage in these hospital diets. But is it better to do that? Is it better to maybe feed them higher concentrate diets in these hospital pens? So we're going to be doing several projects like that with this graduate student. So, and then just the behavior. So we were fortunate to put in some smart feed systems, but any of your feeding systems that can measure the behavior of the animals, I'm just interested in, do they eat more when you put them in a hospital pen, or do they eat less, or, what is the eating behavior? Because they have to set up that pecking order. So are you putting them in with new animals? Do they have to set up a pecking order when they already aren't feeling up to par, or are you better to put them back in your home pen and just look at the feeding behavior there?
Yeah, the hospital pen, sometimes it feels like the only real advantage it has is that it's probably closer to the working facility than the home pen is, and it's easier to keep an eye on that animal. But I agree, between the social hierarchy, like you're talking about, the steer's like, okay, I got 15 new friends, but I didn't have any of them an hour ago. Who's going to get to eat first? And you got to establish that. So that's stressful. And then is it really a good idea to do a big shift in their diet, and then and then we're going to put him back in the home pen, and then he's going to have acidosis for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times it's hard to tell between respiratory disease and acidosis. They have the same symptoms, maybe they wouldn't have the nasal discharge on the acidosis, but they're certainly going to be lethargic, going to be breathing hard, trying to get rid of the extra acid load. And, it's just, there's a lot of challenges. So, and I don't know what the best way to treat these animals. So I'm hoping some of the data that we're doing will help answer some of those questions.
Yeah, the high energy makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because oftentimes their feed intake is very limited anyway. So get the most calories into each mouthful, I'm guessing, is kind of your philosophy there.
Yep. But then there may be things, like your direct fed microbials. What is the level of ionophores that we feed in these hospital pens? So there's just so many questions out there. So.
And there might be some cases where, some of these products that seem to work in stressed animals and not necessarily give us a response in non-stressed animals, that the hospital diet is a great candidate for something like that, right? Like if you're going to put your money in that small package, put it there, because you're likely going to help that calf recover, especially after you've put in the dollars into him for whatever antibiotic treatment you gave him, right? Like give it the best chance to work.
Yep. And the price of the calves now.
Oh my gosh, yes. Absolutely. So I guess the acidosis comment made me think a little bit about, have you guys been doing anything with like liver abscesses down
We
there or
have.
following up?
Yep. So we had a grad student a couple of years ago looked at sampled the calves at slaughter, and then also they went out to the feedlots and sampled some of the feedlot pens to see, was there more organisms that could cause liver abscesses. So liver abscesses can be a problem, and we don't feed tylosin in our diets here, primarily because of the direct vet feed directive. Our local veterinarian doesn't like doing prescriptions. So, I can get it, but, it's just harder to do. So, and that's what a lot of the feed yards around here is they don't use as many or as much tylosin as what they did at one time in their diet. So, but it can be at certain times of the year, liver abscess can be a problem.
Do you feed much for dairy? So you talked about some teaching in dairy production and things like that. Do you feed much for dairy crosses?
We are actually looking at buying some right now. So, and that's going to be a big part of the industry here. There's a lot of dairies in this part of the country. Their calves are dairy beef crosses. So, and that's what I did when I was in Arizona. Is I worked with a neonatal dairy calf, took him from day one all the way through finishing. So I'd like to do more on the calf end, because do you feed them as a beef calf? Do you feed them as a dairy calf? There should be hybrid vigor there. Do they require more fat protein in their milk replacer? Do you wean them at different times? So I'm hoping to get that research going too.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that's fascinating, because we're comparing a calf who is raised kind of in isolation, he's in a hutch or something by himself, versus the beef calf who's like, quite frankly, we don't really know what he's doing. He's nursing mom, right? And we're going to pick him up in 6 months, which I appreciate. What do you think are some of the biggest research questions in that space of how we grow this beef on dairy calf to bring him into the feedlots eventually successfully?
And one of the things, so we just talked about liver abscesses. I think they have bigger liver abscess problems. So, it could be that if we feed them like a dairy calf, they're going to be on a high concentrate diet a lot longer. At what point in time are we causing liver abscesses? Is there some intervention there that we can do to help prevent that? Just the social behavior on these calves too. The calves that are out there with the cows, they know how to interact with some of their other cohorts, but the dairy calf, they're raised in isolation. They're going to have to always learn how to set up their pecking order, or what they know their role is in the environment that they're put in. So there's a lot of research questions there. One of the things that when I was working with the Holstein calves, I know that later on we have more problems with Holstein calves riding each other. So, could that be a problem just because of the way they're reared up the first 60 days of life? Is it that they're always trying to set up their pecking order? So I think there's a lot that we can do on the behavior side of it. Just, does what we're doing, is that causing a problem later on because it just socially they don't know how to act?
So I'm not very well read in this particular space. Is there some work going on at different universities about looking at like group housing, things like that for this kind of grower phase so that they learn some of those social interactions?
Yeah, we did some in Arizona. I had a grad student there that we looked at group housing and then versus single housing, and then also feeding them with a bucket versus a bottle, just to see, do they have differences in performance of those calves? So, and it looks like there is. It's one of the things I observed, and the reason we did that project was when we fed in a group with the bottles, the dominant calf gets most of the milk. they'll steal from the other calves. So then we just like to see if it helped to feed them out of a trough versus the bottles. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done, but there's not very many places that are doing the dairy calf research. It's a lot of labor involved.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking about too. When I was an undergrad at Iowa State, my senior year, one of my 3 jobs that I had was feeding calves at APC outside of town. And so I would be making milk and feeding calves at 5:00 in the morning and stuff. I wonder if this is an opportunity for like the virtual fencing or something like that, because I'm envisioning like a group housing situation, but each calf, almost the same way we train cows for kaling gates, right? Like a calf would be like, that's my spot. And then he can't leave until he finishes his bottle, but somebody else can't come in and drink his milk. Because I can totally see your point that you could have incredible variation in the weight gain in a pen if we have really consistent intakes.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea on the virtual fence. I think there's so many things we can do there, but there aren't a lot of places doing calf research now.
Yeah. The other thing is I've wondered, and you've said it before, right? Is like, do we feed them like a dairy calf? Do we feed it? And I feel like the dairy folks have it dialed in to how they make the replacement heifer, but not necessarily how they make the high growing. I just don't want to feed that calf for a year. I'm sorry. That's what I don't love about the dairy, stuff coming into it, right? It's like, I don't want to tie up that space for that long. So how do we get better gains in the interim so that he's not 400 pounds when he comes in and he's not leaving for a year?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities for research there. I'm hoping we can get something set up here to do some of the calf research, because it's going to be a significant portion of the beef industry for years to come. And just the Holsteins, for a long time, that was pretty significant industry. Now a lot of the dairies are going with the crosses for their calves, because they can get more out of that beef dairy cross than what they can the purebred Holsteins or purebred dairy calves.
Do you think that we'll move more towards beef embryos? So those dairy cows are just incubating beef embryos. So, we still have some epigenetic effects, probably, and other things from being incubated in a dairy cow and everything that she got fed. But we have a purebred beef calf that she delivers instead of a cross.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Hope we go that way.
It's not my own. I was talking to somebody from Idaho one day, and they were like, yeah, I think eventually, they were talking about how terrible the reproductive rates are in dairy cows. And they're like, she's like, she can house it. She's just really terrible at getting bred initially or something like that. And they were like, we're just going to skip that step, put an embryo in. And I think as we get faster at those things, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then also they could do the embryos from the cows they want to keep for replacements so.
Oh, yeah, because the dairy industry is all over that, right? Like they've got 4-month-old heifers that they're extracting oocytes and stuff from, right? And like basically producing that heifer's granddaughters by the time she gets to be old enough to be able to, actually produce her own calf. It's crazy.
It is. There's a lot of advances there. I don't keep up with the technology as much as I do on the feedlot side, but I know they've made quite a few advances in that area of reproduction.
So given your years of experience with dealing with some of maybe the purebred dairy calves coming into the yard, the purebred beef calves, and then these crosses, what's been your observation on the health of those calves?
Usually have better health of the calves, the dairy calves coming into the feed yards, because they've had every opportunity to die before they get to that stage. So, that's just, so I don't know if we're going to have more problems with health on the calves prior to weaning when they're the beef dairy, but I would think that we'd have fewer problems because you should get some hybrid bigger there.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of data sets from a couple of friends who work in this space. And I would say that these are casual observations at this point, but basically saying, it takes a lot more to challenge a cross calf, a beef dairy cross calf, than it does to challenge a purebred dairy calf. So we know that the Holsteins, for example, are very pro-inflammatory. And it's one of the side effects, I think, that came from the hardcore selection for milk. That's our, public service announcement of the day. Don't do single trait selection. I tease. But yeah, I think you're right. Although I like your comment too, right? That they've had the chance to die. So what made it to the feedlot from the, dairy side maybe has the better chance of actually making it. Because I think that is one of the challenges of having some of these really powerful antibiotics, right? Like we've had this increase in late day deads in the feedlot. Is it because they have an increased chance to die because they're alive so much longer to get them to these heavier weights? Or is it because they probably should have died when they were 600 pounds and got sick, but an antibiotic saved them? And then later, when they have any kind of compromised lung function, it's like they're done.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good observation. That's, we're not going to work ourselves out of jobs yet. So.
No. So I'm a mineral nerd, and whenever I give presentations, I always start by saying all the things that minerals are in, and then I have this little thing that comes up. It just says job security, and I think we could probably put the receiving calf nutrition in that area too.
Yeah. Definitely.
Excellent. Well, New Mexico is hosting the animal science national meetings this year. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Excellent. And then I think Western section is going to be co-hosted with that?
Yes. For a long time, it was in the Western section bylaws that when the meeting was in the Western section that they would co-host or be co-host or co-located, I guess would be a better term. So yeah, it's going to be National Canadian Society Western section meeting this year. So there Excellent. Will be some good presentations. I think we have some really good symposia lined out, and it's going to be a good meeting. It's guaranteed to probably be hot.
Because it's in Albuquerque, right?
It is in Albuquerque.
In July.
Yes, in July. But most of the bars are air conditioned, so they'll be put
well, that's the important part. The houses may not be, but the bars are. Well, the houses probably are there.
It's going to be a good meeting. I so much enjoy the animal science meetings and the section meetings. I enjoy all the sections. So.
Yeah, so you've probably always been in Western section from where you've been.
I was in Southern section too. So, and then when I was here, prior to moving to Arizona, I always went to the Midwest section. The Midwest section has always had good stocker and feedlot sessions. There's people forget that. They think it's more of a swine meeting, and it is primarily swine, but there's always been good stocker sessions going on and feedlot sessions at the Midwest section.
Yeah, absolutely. We fill a good 2.5 days of that meeting with beef research. So I think it's definitely one of the strongest sections. Southeast section would be very strong for forages. Northeast would be strong for dairy. And then the West is, I don't know if I say more variable, but just like, range cow stuff, big feedlot, kind of commercial size pens sort of things and stuff. So, and you're right, Midwest is swine and genetics and stuff, but it's okay. They're in their own rooms. We don't mingle with them.
I know. No need to.
Absolutely. I went to Western for the first time 2 years ago when it was in Fort Collins. Took my whole grad group out. We road tripped out. We did a 3-day trip at Estes Park that I took them hiking and stuff, just like kind of a thank you for being a great group. And we really enjoyed the Western section. That was nice. And then last year was Park City. We didn't get to go to that because we're just already starting the feedlot research season here by the end of September. So it's a tough time to do that, but it's a great meeting.
It is. I think all the section meetings are really good meetings. And then I enjoy the national too. It's just so many opportunities to hear some good science and network with your colleagues. It's just a really good meeting. So good
That's
organization.
The older you get, you don't actually make it through the doors to go to the meetings, right? You're just stuck in the hallway talking to people.
Oh, you do. And sometimes that's the best place to get your new ideas and you can have your grad students go to the sessions, and they can brief you on what they found out.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, okay. Well, we've reached the point of our final 3 questions. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. So the first question is, what is your favorite beef resource?
Favorite beef resource? That would be, so give me an example.
Let's see. We've heard the NRC, of course, for the nutritionists.
Yes. I like trade publications, actually.
Okay.
Even being a scientist, I really enjoy the trade publications. To be able to go in and it's more producer focused articles in there. So I really enjoy most of the trade publications that I receive, like Progressive Cattleman's, Feedlot Magazine, things like that.
Absolutely. I just interviewed Dan Lloyd. That was one of the ones he suggested too, was the trade publications. Same reason, finger on the pulse. Okay, second question. What is something not related to beef that you're reading right now?
Spillover. I'm rereading it, actually, because of so spillover is the transfer of organisms from animals to humans. And there's recent outbreak in Africa again of, can't think of what the disease is, but they actually talked about it in spillover. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's like a hemorrhagic fever, but not Ebola, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they talked about that in spillover, and then with COVID happening, some evidence that may have come from animals to humans. So I'm rereading spillover.
Nice. It's always interesting to hear what people are reading. Okay, so the third and final question is, what is a trait of someone that you admire that has allowed them to be successful?
Great leadership. It's just, there's some people who can just lead other people. So I mentioned one of them there at the beginning, and that's Mark Gallion. He is just a natural born leader. I don't know how, they get that trait, but it's something that I just really admire when people have natural born leadership skills.
Nice. I definitely agree with that. Some people just have that je ne sais quoi, right? Like they walk into a room and you're like, all right, you can be in charge.
Yeah.
You seem to know what's going on.
Yeah. I'll just sit in the back.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Duff, this has been really fun chatting with you today. We were glad to have you on the show and look forward to having you again in the future.
Yeah, anytime. And Mark Brainine's actually here today. I'll tell him you said hi. Yeah.
You absolutely better tell him I said hi. I love Mark. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he is.